all at top speed right now. So write down what you can. If you can't write it down, it's on video so you can get it later. We are on problem 4A, which is a solve problem. We are going to solve. So, here we go. Does anybody have an idea when you look at this problem? Is there anybody who has a thought about maybe how this would work? Well, it's got a bunch of terms, right? 4 terms. So normally what we do with 4 terms is we do something called factoring by grouping. We've done this before. We're going to take our first 2 terms, we're just going to look at just the first 2, and say, okay, what can come out of the first 2 terms? And the answer is out can come an x squared. What will be left if I pull out an x squared? X plus 4. Very nicely done. Now, when I go to the next 2 terms, I am going to do the same thing, right? I'm going to ask myself, what can come out of the next 2 terms? Negative 4. Now, this is where we get into trouble sometimes. If we take out a negative 4, it's going to leave me with a positive x. Everybody good with that? And a positive 4. If you don't believe me, distribute back, and you would get negative 4 minus 16. Now, when you factor by grouping, you must end up with the same factor. Write that factor down. Do not square it. Do not write it twice. Just write it down. Whatever the common one was. If there is no common one, you messed up. Okay? There has to be a common factor. Everything else in the problem then gets mushed together in another parenthesis. So for us, that would be x squared minus 4. Now we're almost done. What about this guy? What can you tell me? Can anybody tell me anything about x squared minus 4? Olivia? Exactly, it's called the difference of squares, isn't it, Olivia? And it factors as x plus 2, x minus 2. Now, once we get all our factors written out, what's the next step? Well, we set each one equal to 0, and some of you will want to actually write that down. Now, some of you don't need to do this. Some of you can go straight to the answers. This is the next step, but you don't have to write that step down if you can do it in your head. Because if x plus 4 is 0, what's x going to equal? Negative 4, or 2, or negative 2. Those are the answers. This is what we're shooting for right here. Okay? Now, I don't want to be too discombobulated, but let's look at practice test 2, and let's find a problem like that on practice test 2 and work through it together. Let's see, I'm looking at practice test 2, and on practice test 2 is problem 3C. I'm sorry if this is a little disorganized. You might want to get practice test 2 out. What does matter about that?
There are a ton of minutes.
They're over here.
See?
They're over here
They
too?
were.
Great.
I wonder here. I've got these bananas over here.
That's probably what they're after, to be honest.
Well, you know what?
Yeah, I can see them over there.
I'm gonna put this over here in this room.
Right there. You can see them.
That's really different.
Now we'll just have gnats in the room. Okay. All right, everybody find practice test 2. We're looking at 3C. Everybody see this problem? Do you see the similarity between this problem and this one?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see if we can work through this one together with some success. This sheet will be tonight's homework anyhow, so we'll just have a head start on it. Okay? So here we go. What's our first step? We're going to look at those two terms, and what are we going to do?
Separate them.
We're going to take out,
Would it be 3x squared?
what can I take out of both of these now? I can't take a 3 out.
X squared?
I can take out an x squared. And what will I have left if I take out an x squared?
X plus 3.
X plus 3, perfect. Now what am I going to take out of my second 2? Negative 4, very good. And what will I have left if I take out a negative 4? X plus 3. Perfect. I'm supposed to have a common factor, right? See it here? If I see it, there's my common factor. I'll cross it out. I don't square it. I don't write it twice. I just write it down. Now, what's left? X squared minus 4. What can you tell me about x squared minus 4? It factors as, same way this one did, x plus 2, x minus 2. Very, very good. So what are the answers to this problem? X equals what?
-3, -2, and 2.
Perfect. Done.
So, on number, on the first page, 2, would that be a factoring problem?
Okay,
I don't know the difference.
okay. So you're on
On page number 2,
practice test 2,
right, that factoring,
problem 2,
right.
2A.
2A.
Yeah.
Okay, now, 2A can be done exactly the same way, only since there's only 3 terms, you're not going to be factoring by grouping. You're going to be factoring like this. Or, Gibran, since it's a quadratic, an x squared equation, these were not x squares. Pay attention. These were x cubes. But since the one you asked about is a quadratic, you could do the quadratic formula if you like that better. While we're here, let's go ahead and do that problem since it's in tonight's homework. This is on practice test 2. Practice test 2, 2A. Gibran says, that looks like the same kind of problem, Mrs. Ford, and it is in the big picture. Specifically, it's not, because this isn't a cube, so I'm not going to be grouping, but I could do this. Or I could do this. Do you see that? It's a quadratic. So can I do this? Absolutely. So if this is easier for you, this is what you want to do. If you want to factor it, you can. It would factor like that if you wanted to factor it, which would mean x would equal 2/3 or -1/2. But I think a lot of you are going to choose to use the quadratic formula because you don't like to factor with numbers like this, and that's okay. B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Now this is good, this is really good practice for us because we need to be able to figure this out. So let me back up and slow down here. I did the problem one way already. I factored it. That factoring is tricky. Sometimes we struggle with that a little bit. So I said, hey, let's just use the quadratic formula. This is what I ended up with. Okay? So I have x equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of, okay, what is negative 2 times 6? Negative 12 times negative 4, 48 plus 1, 49. So I got the square root of 49, which just happens to be, ahead of myself, 7.
Wait, isn't it 1 minus though? Oh wait, never mind. Never mind.
So I have 1 plus 7 over 12 and 1 minus 7 over 12. What's 1 plus 7? And if I take a 4 out of both of those, I'm left with 2/3. Was that one of the answers I got when I did it the other way? Yep. What's 1 minus 7 twelfths? 1 minus 7, negative 6 twelfths, which is negative 1/2. Was that the other answer I got when I did it that way? Yeah. Does it matter which way you do it? No. But Gibran is right. It's very similar. It can be done the same way as the other one, factoring. Are we on practice test 2 or? 2. Okay, so we're on practice test 2, and we're looking at E. Oh, wait a minute. What am I looking at?
2B.
2B. 2B. Okay, this is practice test 2, problem 2B. I'm going to draw a number line. What number am I going to put right in the middle of that number line? Negative 2. There it is, negative 2. And then I am going to count back and forth how many spaces? 7. So if I count forward 7, I would be at 5. And I'll put an open dot there. And if I count backward 7, I would be at negative 9. I'll put an open dot there. Now I need to either shade in between my dots or outside my dots. This is a greater than problem. That means more than 7 units away, farther away. So I'm going to shade out here and out here, which means that my answer is everything that is either less than negative 9 or bigger than 5. Now the problem in last night's homework that corresponds to that, we'll do it for extra practice now that we've done that one. The one that corresponds is 1B, and it looks like this. Now this is harder. What makes that one harder? The 2x. So do you remember how we took care of that? In our notes, do you remember how we took care of that 2x? Divide by 2. Very good, Bryce. Divide by 2. And I have to remember, though, that I'm dividing everything by 2, right? So now my problem looks like this. Divide everything by 2. This is in last night's homework. This was on the original practice test. It's problem 1B. And I'm doing it because it's just like that one, so we're just getting some extra practice.
On the numbers you showed, like you just had 2x minus 3 is greater than 4, and 2x minus 3 is, I mean, I know you're doing it right, I'm just saying, I just wondered if that's like a different way of
That's
doing it.
just a different way of doing it.
Okay.
Different way of doing it. So let's see if we get the same answer, Will. I think we will. And this is going to be faster. What goes right here in the middle of the number line?
3/2.
3/2. Very good. How come in this one I put a negative 2 in the middle? What's my rule?
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite, right? It's the opposite. So opposite here would be positive 3/2. Now I'm going to count backwards and forwards. Absolute value is a distance. It's a distance. So I'm starting at this middle point and I'm counting a distance back and forth. How far back and forth am I counting?
2.
2. So if I count ahead 2,
7/2.
yes, if it's easier for you, you can think of this as 1.5 if you want to go decimally. 1.5, if I go forward, I'd be at 3.5. Would you agree with that? Or, as Mr. Minch said, 7/2. Now what if I back up 2? Where would I be if I backed up 2?
Negative.
-1/2? So fractionally, you can be using these two numbers. Decimally, you can be using these, whatever's easiest for you. And these would be open dots again, wouldn't they? And then all I have to decide is, do I want to shade in between my dots or do I want to shade outside my dots? And I look right here. What does that say to me?
Outside.
Outside. Greater than means farther away. So my answer is less than -1/2 or bigger than 7/2. I use the fractions, you could use the decimals. All right, did anybody find anything else in last night's homework? We'll do the one from last night's homework and the practice test 2-1 both. But let's look at last night's homework since you already looked at it over. Did anybody find anything else? Or do you see anything now on practice test P?
Oh,
Do you see anything
I
now?
don't really get the eyes.
Which one, Abby?
Can we do, which one is it? I think it was on practice test 2. It was number 4A.
Okay, wait, let's look at last night's homework.
Oh,
That's what you should have started with. So,
2A
2A?
or whichever one.
Okay, so we're on last night's homework, which is practice test P. We're looking at 2A, which says subtract these two numbers. Okay?
What is I equal? 1?
It's the square root of -1. Were you absent that day?
I was absent just yesterday.
Okay, all right. Well, look in your notes, because we spent a whole day talking about
I
these
know,
things. The square root of -1 is what I is, okay? But we just leave it as I. It just, we're allowed to, just like we leave pi, we're allowed to leave I. So now we're gonna subtract these two. What do I have to be careful of?
The negative.
I'm distributing that negative, right? So I've got to make sure I make that a -3 and a positive 2i. And then what do I do?
Wouldn't you?
I just collect like terms. This is an addition problem. I'm not multiplying here, I'm adding. So I'm just going to add like terms. So what's 4 minus 3? 1. What's I plus 2i? And there it is. That's all there is to it. So if I looked at practice test 2, which is tonight's homework, The corresponding problem is 4a. Don't you love this switching back and forth? Sorry about that. 4a is this. It's exactly the same scenario, isn't it? So what will I do first? What will I do first? Distribute, yep. So far, so good? Now I'll just collect my terms. So here's a 4 minus 6. What's that? And a negative 2 minus I. Here we go. That's the answer.
Can we do 4B rule?
4B on practice test 2. Practice test 2. 4B is this. Does anybody remember how we do this?
Once we flip it around, flip this on and around. And
Well, we multiply the top and the bottom by what we call the conjugate, which is 2 plus 3i. Remember that? That one day I emailed Mr. Miller because Julia remembered that. He was so tickled, by the way. So I multiply top and bottom by 2 plus 3i. Now what do? Now I FOIL. So I've got all this foiling to do. Lots of foiling. So on the top, first, outside, inside, last. Bottom, first, outside, inside, last. Remember, negative 3i times positive 3i would be negative 9i squared. Okay. Can I add these together?
Yes.
So I have 8 plus 18i. And then tell me about I squared. What are we supposed to remember about I squared?
Negative
It's
9.
negative 1. So that's going to make negative 9.
Yeah.
Remember, I squared is negative 1. On the bottom, what happens to these two guys?
It can't cancel.
Gone. 4. All right, now tell me about this.
Plus 9.
Plus 9, because this is negative 9 times negative 1. Remember, I squared is negative 1. So what have I got on top? Negative 1 plus 18i. Is that right? Negative 1. And on the bottom, I just have a plain old
13.
13. Let's go back to last night's homework. This is practice test P. 2B was a little bit easier than that. This was 2B on last night's homework, practice test P. This was last night's homework, or this was 2B. What's going to be your strategy with that? Distribute or FOIL, right? So that would be first, outside, inside, and last. Do my insides add together?
Yeah.
Negative 9i.
Yeah.
Tell me about negative 2i squared.
2.
Plus 2 plus 18 gives me 20 minus 9i would be the answer. Alrighty? Anything else in last night's that you want to look at? Practice test B. We're not supposed to be on our phones, really, seriously. They said that's one thing we're supposed to keep you off your phone. If you need to go to counseling, you can.
Can we do 5A?
Last night's homework, 5A. What does that even mean? What am I even supposed to be doing in 5A? No, I'm not finding a point. They gave me 2 points in 5A. Somebody said it. This means what? Distance. And there is a formula for distance, which will not be provided to you. I will provide you the projectile motion formula, but I'm not going to give you the distance formula. You need to know it. How does the distance formula work? Square root. Very good. What's under the square root? So I'm going to subtract my x's. Very good, Bryce. Thank you. And I'm going to square that, right? X minus x squared plus y minus y squared. Are you remembering this, kids, somewhat? Does it come back a little bit?
50.
So that'll be the square root of, okay, 6 minus 1 is 5. 5. Okay, so you said the square root of 50. You're exactly right. Now, what do we do with our radicals, though? If they break down, we break them down. So 50 is 25 times 2, or 5 times 5 times 2. So there's 2 5s and a leftover 2. You okay with 5 root 2? All right. Let's look at the corresponding one on practice test 2. We're going to get all your homework done for you tonight, practically. Practice test 2. Where's the corresponding problem?
I don't think there is one.
Yeah, 9A.
9A, yep. 9A. So my points are 4, 1, 6, 11. And I'm finding the distance. Let's do this. We want to get this question right on test. Well, we'd like to get them all right on test day. But for sure this one, right? This should be an easy one.
Yeah.
So here we go. Square root. So 6 minus 4 squared. Don't forget to square. 11 minus 1 squared, right? So we've got 2 squared and 10 squared.
So 104. Yeah, that's the square root.
The square root of 104. I have no idea, so I'm going to break it down. And with big numbers like this, I just start with 2. Yeah, so it's 2 times 52. And 52 is 2 times 26. And 26 is 2 times 13. See how easy that was? Just keep going by 2's. So I got 2 2's. And a leftover 2 and 13. So 2 radical 26. You are exactly right.
Can we do that midpoint problem?
Yep. Let's do that same one since we're on that page. Midpoint using these 2 points. This is practice test 2, number 9B. Yeah, practice test 2, number 9B. We're going to find the midpoint. What's our key word when we're doing midpoint? We think average. And how do you average things? add them and divide by 2. So 4 and 6 make 10, divided by 2 is 5. 1 and 11 makes 12, divided by 2 is 6. Done. That's the midpoint. Midpoint is average. What's the midpoint of these two from last night's homework? The midpoint here? 1 plus 6, that'd be 7 halves. Negative 2 and 3, 1 half. Just add them and divide by 2. Easy, easy, easy. You guys have been remarkable today. Here's what I'd like to do. I have no idea how much time is left. I'd like you to be together at your table and maybe work on practice test 2 a little bit more. We've filled in a lot of it already, but there's still some to fill in, so maybe you can work together. I'll wander about and help you too.